shy waitress greeted Vampire King's deaf mom. Her greetings made every guest frozen and shocked. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's dive into today's story. Imagine working at one of the most prestigious restaurants in town, serving the city's elite, where every move you make is watched, and every step you take is expected to be flawless. For Mia, a shy waitress, this was her everyday life. She had always kept her head down, making sure her presence went unnoticed, blending in with the background of the glistening chandeliers and polished silverware. However, tonight would be different. Tonight, Mia would unknowingly cross paths with the supernatural world. It was the grand opening of a new exclusive dining experience, a lavish affair that promised elegance, power, and mystery. The guests, dressed in their finest attire, whispered amongst themselves, their voices dripping with wealth and influence. Mia had never seen so many high-profile figures in one place, and her nervousness showed as she carefully carried a tray of wine glasses, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. As she made her way across the room, she caught sight of a table at the far end of the hall. At its center sat a woman, an elderly lady with silver hair and a regal presence, though she sat alone. The woman's eyes, though sharp, seemed distant. Mia felt an odd pull, something she couldn't quite explain. She had heard rumors about this particular guest, the Vampire King's mother, a figure cloaked in mystery. She was said to be deaf, but her presence was so commanding that no one dared speak of her condition aloud. Mia was about to continue her rounds when something stopped her. The woman's eyes locked onto her, and Mia, almost instinctively, approached. She didn't know why, but she felt compelled to acknowledge the woman in a way that felt right. Without thinking, Mia raised her hands and signed a simple greeting, one she had learned from her grandmother's old journal. May the night bring you peace, your grace. You honor us with your presence. The moment Mia signed those words, the room seemed to freeze. The chatter halted, and a cold silence fell over the gathering. All eyes shifted toward her, as though time itself had paused. Mia's heart raced. She had only meant to be polite, to make the elderly woman feel welcome. But as the guests stared at her in shock, she realized something was different. The woman's face softened, and a smile spread across her lips, tears welling in her eyes. She had just spoken a language long forgotten, one that had been passed down through the centuries. The reaction was not just surprise, it was reverence. The woman signed back, her gestures slow, careful, but full of emotion. Mia's confusion deepened. What had just happened? Why did this woman, of all people, seem so moved by her simple greeting? As Mia tried to process the situation, she noticed a figure at the far end of the room, standing tall and imposing, his piercing amber eyes locked on her. The Vampire King. His presence was magnetic, a force that seemed to command the attention of everyone around him. He didn't move. He didn't speak. But his gaze, cold and calculating, was now fixed on Mia. She could feel his eyes burning into her, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly seen. She couldn't explain why, but in that moment, she knew this was just the beginning of something that would change her life forever. The room was still frozen in a stunned silence. Mia stood there, hands still raised in the air, her eyes locked with the elderly woman who had just responded to her greeting with a look of disbelief and wonder. The Vampire King's mother, who had been the subject of whispers and rumors for years, now smiled at her in a way that made Mia's heart race. She had no idea what was happening, but there was something in the air, a weight that pressed on her chest, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The guests around her remained perfectly still, as though too afraid to even blink. She glanced over her shoulder, catching the gaze of the man she had noticed earlier, the one who seemed to radiate power, a man who looked as though he belonged in a world far beyond her own. His amber eyes gleamed from across the room, and for a moment, Mia felt like the ground beneath her might give way. That was when the silence broke. The woman, her mother, signed something in return. The gesture was slow, deliberate, and Mia could feel the significance in every movement. It was as though the words were not just a response, but a form of recognition. Mia was stunned. She had only learned basic sign language from her grandmother's old journal, a journal filled with stories of ancient customs and forgotten languages. But she had never expected to use it in a moment like this. It wasn't just any greeting. It was something far more profound. The Vampire King's mother, a woman who had been silent for so long, was speaking to her, and not only that, she was grateful. Grateful for a simple, unassuming gesture that Mia had made without a second thought. As the woman's fingers traced the air in graceful, almost delicate movements, Mia couldn't help but feel as though she had just unlocked a secret. A door that had been closed for centuries had just been opened, and she had somehow stumbled upon it. "Thank you," the woman signed with a smile. Mia couldn't find her words. She wasn't sure what was happening or why it was happening to her, but there was a strange sense of peace in the woman's eyes. The power in the room seemed to shift. The tension that had been hanging in the air slowly began to dissipate as the guests started to murmur amongst themselves. It was as if they were coming out of a trance, realizing the gravity of what had just taken place. And then, from across the room, the Vampire King moved. Slowly, purposefully, he stood up. His eyes never left Mia, and the intensity of his gaze made her feel as though he could see straight through her. As he made his way across the room, the crowd parted, creating a clear path for him. Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had seen him from a distance, but up close, the Vampire King was even more imposing. His dark hair fell in waves around his face, and his features were sharp and perfectly symmetrical, giving him an almost ethereal quality. He moved with an ease that was both graceful and dangerous, like a predator who knew its power. When he reached her, he didn't say anything at first. Instead, he simply stood there, staring at her with those penetrating amber eyes. His presence seemed to fill the entire room. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. She felt small under his gaze, unsure of what to do or say. "You've caught my attention," the Vampire King finally spoke, his voice low and commanding. Mia's mind raced. Caught his attention? She had done nothing special. She was just a waitress, trying to make a living, trying to keep her head down and do her job. But this was something entirely different. "I don't know what happened," Mia whispered, her voice trembling. I only wanted to be polite." The Vampire King's gaze softened ever so slightly, but his next words were sharp. "Do you know who I am?" Mia nodded, though she still didn't fully understand the significance of what was happening. "You are the Vampire King," she said, almost too quietly. "But why did I?" "You spoke the silent tongue," he interrupted, his tone full of surprise. "Do you understand what that means?" Mia shook her head, the confusion overwhelming her. "No, I don't. I don't even know how I knew it. Her voice trailed off, uncertain of how to explain. "The silent tongue is an ancient language," the Vampire King said, his voice softer now, almost thoughtful. "It was once spoken only by the royal families of the vampire clans. It has been lost to most, but you—" He paused, his eyes narrowing slightly. "You are not just any human." His words left Mia even more confused, and yet a strange sense of understanding began to stir within her. What did he mean by that? Why did he think she was different from the other humans around him? "I don't know what you're talking about," Mia replied, her voice a mixture of fear and curiosity. "I'm just a waitress. I don't belong here. I don't even know how I spoke that language." The Vampire King studied her for a long moment, his amber eyes searching her face as if he were trying to read her soul. Finally, he spoke again. "You may not understand it now, but you will. In time, you will learn what it means to be a part of this world. A world you've just entered without knowing." Mia took a step back, her mind racing. This was far beyond anything she had ever imagined. She had thought this job was just another way to get by, but now she was standing face to face with a being that was not only beyond human, but seemed to hold secrets that could change her life forever. As the Vampire King turned to leave, he looked over his shoulder one last time. "Stay close. There's much more for you to discover." And with that, he was gone, disappearing into the crowd, leaving Mia standing there, her heart still racing, her mind reeling with the weight of what had just happened. It was the next day when Mia's life truly began to unravel. She had barely slept, too consumed with the events of the previous night to rest. The memory of the Vampire King's gaze, the weight of his words, and the silent acknowledgement between him and his mother had played on repeat in her mind. She could still feel the shock that had rippled through the room as her simple greeting had left every guest frozen, and her confusion had only deepened when the vampire king himself had spoken to her. It was all so surreal. Could she really have spoken an ancient language, one that had been lost to time? She had only learned basic sign language to communicate with her grandmother, who had been deaf. But this was something else entirely. As she prepared for another shift at the restaurant, Mia couldn't shake the feeling that something big was coming. Something that would pull her further into the strange world she had just brushed up against. She arrived at the restaurant early, as always, and began setting up for the dinner service. Her mind wandered as she wiped down the tables, her thoughts drifting to the previous night's encounter. She had tried to brush it off, thinking maybe it was just a misunderstanding. But the Vampire King's words echoed in her ears. "You are not just any human." What did that mean? The shift was quiet at first, a lull in the usual chaos of a busy restaurant, giving Mia a moment to breathe. She barely had time to process her thoughts when she saw a familiar face walk through the door. It was the Vampire King's mother, the one she had greeted the night before. This time, she wasn't alone. With her was a man, tall and imposing, dressed in dark, elegant clothes. He carried himself with the kind of power that made people around him instinctively step aside. It was him, the Vampire King. Mia's heart skipped a beat. She had hoped maybe the night before had been a dream, but now, seeing him in person again, the reality of what had happened hit her full force. Her breath caught in her throat, and for a moment, she froze in place. He didn't look at her immediately, but when he did, those amber eyes locked onto hers like a predator fixing its gaze on prey. He was as unapproachable as ever, but there was something different in the way he looked at her today, an unspoken recognition. He motioned for his mother to sit, and then he turned toward Mia, his gaze still intense. "We need to talk," he said, his voice smooth but commanding. His words sent a chill down Mia's spine. She didn't know what he wanted, but the last thing she expected was for him to call her over. "Come here," he repeated. Mia hesitated, her legs feeling heavy as she slowly walked over to his table. The world around her seemed to fade away. The air was thick with tension, and she could feel everyone watching her as she approached. When she reached their table, she stood in front of them, unsure of what to say or do. The Vampire King didn't speak right away. Instead, he studied her for a moment, his eyes running over her face as if searching for something he couldn't quite place. His mother, however, didn't seem to be paying much attention to the exchange. She sat quietly, her hands resting in her lap, a faint smile still playing on her lips from the night before. "I know you don't understand," the Vampire King said finally, his voice low, "but last night, you opened a door that hasn't been opened for centuries." Mia's mind raced. A door? What was he talking about? "I don't know what you mean," she replied, her voice shaky. I spoke the sign language. I didn't think it was anything special." The Vampire King's gaze softened ever so slightly, though it was still intense. "It is special," he said. "That language, the silent tongue, is tied to our history, a history that's been buried for so long. It's the language of the old royal bloodlines. And somehow you speak it." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. The weight of his words settled on her like a heavy blanket. This wasn't just about a simple greeting. It was about something much bigger. "I don't understand," Mia whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't even know how I knew it. I just wanted to be polite. I didn't mean anything by it." The Vampire King leaned forward slightly, his amber eyes fixed on her. "And that's exactly why it's so important. You didn't just speak the words, you brought them to life. You spoke to my mother, and in doing so, you connected us to a past we thought was lost forever." Mia felt a wave of nausea. She had no idea what he was talking about, but the intensity of his gaze made it clear that this wasn't something trivial. "What does this mean for me?" she asked, her voice trembling. The Vampire King paused, his expression unreadable. "It means you're not just a waitress, Mia. You're part of something far greater than you realize. Something that's been waiting for you." His words hit her like a ton of bricks. She had thought her life was nothing special, just another day working at a fancy restaurant, trying to get by. But now, everything had changed. The Vampire King's mother looked at her with a kind of knowing that only deepened Mia's confusion. "You will come to understand soon," the Vampire King's mother sighed, her face full of warmth. But for now, rest. You'll need your strength for what's coming. What was coming? Mia wasn't sure, but one thing was clear. Her life would never be the same again. She nodded slowly, too stunned to speak, and backed away from the table. As she walked back to her station, she felt the weight of the Vampire King's gaze still on her, like a shadow that would never leave. The days that followed were a blur for Mia. She couldn't shake the feeling that her life had somehow veered into a new, unfamiliar path, one that she had never expected. The Vampire King's words echoed in her mind constantly. You're not just a waitress, Mia. You're part of something far greater than you realize. She had gone to work, done her usual routine, but everything felt different. The air around her seemed charged with an energy she couldn't explain. The looks she received from the other staff, from the guests, all felt heavier now, like everyone knew something she didn't. The restaurant, once her place of refuge, now seemed like a cage. She couldn't focus on her tasks. Her mind kept wandering back to the Vampire King's mother and that strange, ancient language she had spoken, the silent tongue. She hadn't meant for it to happen. It was just a greeting, a small gesture of kindness. But it had set things in motion that she didn't understand. It wasn't long before she saw him again. The Vampire King walked into the restaurant one evening, this time without his mother. His presence commanded attention. The room seemed to hush as he entered. His eyes scanned the space, and when they landed on her, it felt as if the entire world had stopped. Mia's breath hitched in her chest. He walked toward her with purpose, every step precise and measured. He didn't speak immediately, but the intensity of his gaze said everything. When he finally stopped in front of her, she could feel the weight of his stare as if it were pressing into her very soul. I need you to come with me, he said, his voice low and smooth, carrying an authority that left no room for refusal. Mia's heart raced. She wasn't sure what he meant, but there was no mistaking the command in his voice. Where? She managed to ask, her voice barely above a whisper. To the estate. There's much you need to learn, he replied. The words sent a shiver down her spine. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to refuse, but there was something in his eyes, something that told her this was something she couldn't avoid. Her curiosity outweighed her fear. All right, she said, her voice trembling but determined. Without another word, the Vampire King led her out of the restaurant. As they walked to the car waiting outside, Mia couldn't help but glance around, feeling as if the whole world was watching her. The drive to the estate was silent. The Vampire King didn't say a word, and Mia was too consumed with her own thoughts to speak. What was this place? What did he want from her? And why was she the one he had chosen? When they finally arrived at the estate, Mia was in awe. The mansion stood at the edge of the city, its Gothic architecture towering above her, shrouded in an air of mystery and power. It was unlike anything she had ever seen. As they walked through the grand doors, Mia's senses were overwhelmed by the sheer opulence of the place. The floors were made of polished marble, the walls adorned with ancient tapestries, and the air smelled faintly of old books and incense. It was beautiful, but also cold and intimidating. The Vampire King led her down a series of hallways, their footsteps echoing off the stone walls. Finally, they reached a large room at the end of a long corridor. It was filled with bookshelves, ancient scrolls, and artifacts that looked like they belonged in a museum. The Vampire King stopped in the center of the room and turned to face her. This is where it begins, he said. Your journey into this world. Mia's heart raced. She didn't know what he meant by that, but the way he spoke made it clear that this was more than just a visit. It was a turning point in her life. What do you want from me? She asked, her voice trembling. I want you to understand your place in all of this, he replied. You've unlocked something powerful. And now, you need to learn how to control it. Control what? Mia asked, her voice shaking with confusion. The silent tongue, he said. You have a gift, Mia. A connection to our world that no one else has. And with that gift comes responsibility. Mia felt a lump form in her throat. She had no idea what he was talking about. All she had done was speak a simple greeting. But the look in his eyes told her that there was something far more significant at play. I don't understand, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King stepped closer to her, his amber eyes never leaving hers. You will. In time, you will understand. But first, you must accept who you are. Who am I? Mia asked, her voice breaking. You are the key to something ancient, he said softly. Something that has been waiting for centuries. You are part of a world that you never knew existed, a world that has been hidden from humans for so long. And now, that world is calling to you. Mia's head was spinning. She had no idea what he meant, but deep down, she could feel that this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. She didn't know where it would lead or what dangers lay ahead, but one thing was clear. She could never go back to the life she once knew. I don't know if I'm ready for this, she whispered. The Vampire King reached out and gently touched her arm, his touch surprisingly warm. You don't have to be ready, he said softly. You just have to trust that this is your path, and I'll help you walk it. Mia looked into his amber eyes, and for the first time, she felt a strange sense of calm. The fear was still there, but it was tempered by something else: curiosity, wonder, and the feeling that she was standing on the precipice of something vast and powerful. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time, she was ready to find out. In the days that followed, Mia found herself trapped between two worlds. The ordinary, mundane life she had once known, filled with the clinking of silverware and the bustling noise of the restaurant, seemed like a distant memory. Now, everything was different. Every look she received, every word spoken around her felt heavy, as though everyone knew something she didn't. The Vampire King had made it clear, she was not just a waitress. She was part of something much bigger, something ancient, and the weight of that revelation hung over her like a dark cloud. The mansion had become her new reality. At first, Mia had thought it would be a temporary visit, a few hours spent in the strange, intimidating estate. But as the days passed, it became clear that the Vampire King had no intention of letting her go. He had promised that she would learn about the silent tongue, and that was exactly what he intended to teach her. The lessons began each morning, with the Vampire King himself overseeing her progress. Mia had been given a room in the mansion, a lavish space filled with velvet curtains, gold-trimmed furniture, and walls lined with old books. The contrast between her humble past and this extravagant world was not lost on her. It was as if she had stepped into a dream she never knew she wanted. But the beauty of the place did nothing to ease her nerves. The Vampire King's lessons were demanding. He taught her the intricacies of the silent tongue, showing her how every gesture, every movement of the hands carried meaning far beyond simple words. The language was ancient, its roots deeply entwined with the history of vampires, and Mia struggled to grasp it. But the Vampire King was patient, though there was always an underlying intensity in his eyes, as if he were waiting for something from her. Each day, she learned more, and each night, she lay in her bed, restless and uncertain about the path ahead. The other inhabitants of the estate watched her closely, servants, guards, and nobles alike. They all seemed to know what she was becoming, and it made Mia uneasy. They spoke in hushed tones when they thought she couldn't hear, casting furtive glances in her direction. The tension in the air was palpable, and Mia couldn't help but wonder if she was more than just a student to them. Was she a threat? A key to something they feared? She didn't know, but she felt the pressure growing with each passing day. One evening, after a particularly difficult lesson, Mia found herself standing by the window of her room, staring out at the vast estate. The grounds stretched out before her, the lush gardens and towering trees shrouded in the soft glow of the moonlight. It was beautiful, yes, but there was something eerie about it, as if the land itself held secrets it wasn't willing to share. That was when she heard the knock. It was soft, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down her spine. Mia turned away from the window, her heart beating faster. She wasn't expecting anyone, and the fact that someone had come to her door unannounced only added to the tension. She crossed the room quickly and opened the door, only to find one of the mansion's servants standing there, a woman dressed in black, her face expressionless. "The Vampire King requests your presence," the servant said, her voice cold. Now, Mia's stomach twisted. She had been expecting the Vampire King to summon her eventually, but she hadn't anticipated it to be this soon. She followed the servant down the long, winding hallways of the mansion, her footsteps echoing in the silence. The further they went, the darker the atmosphere seemed to become. The grand chandeliers overhead dimmed, and the air grew colder, almost suffocating. Finally, they arrived at a large, imposing door. The servant knocked 3 times, and a voice from inside called, "Enter." The servant opened the door and stepped aside, allowing Mia to enter. The Vampire King was standing by a large fireplace, his back to her. He was staring into the flames, his expression unreadable. "You've made progress," he said without turning around. "But we still have much to cover." Mia nodded, her throat dry. She had learned the silent tongue, but it still felt like she was just scratching the surface. She wanted to understand, to find out what this world truly meant, but she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something more to it, something the Vampire King wasn't telling her. "I'm ready," she said, her voice firm, though her heart was pounding in her chest. The Vampire King finally turned to face her, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light. "Good," he said, his tone hardening. "But there's something you need to understand, Mia. You were chosen for a reason. Your bloodline has ties to ours. The silent tongue is a part of you, a connection to a power you've yet to fully comprehend. And that power will come with a price." Mia's mind raced. "A price?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Vampire King stepped closer to her, his eyes never leaving hers. "You are bound to this world now. There is no turning back. And the more you learn, the more danger you will face." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. "What kind of danger?" she asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. "You will see," he said cryptically, his voice low. "But first, you must prove yourself. There are others who will try to use you, to take what's rightfully ours. They won't stop until they have what they want." Mia swallowed hard. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling inside her. "Stay close," the Vampire King replied, his tone suddenly softer. "Trust me, and I will protect you. But remember this, there is no going back." His words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mia nodded, the weight of his warning settling deep within her. She had no idea what she was getting into, but she knew one thing for certain. Her life would never be the same again. The next few days were a blur of tension and discovery for Mia. The Vampire King's words weighed heavily on her. "Stay close. Trust me, and I will protect you." Every time she walked through the massive hallways of the mansion or sat alone in her lavish room, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was teetering on the edge of something huge. She had been drawn into a world she didn't understand, and yet, she couldn't bring herself to pull away. The lessons continued, more intense each day. Mia learned to move through the silent tongue with growing confidence, but every lesson left her with more questions than answers. The more she learned, the more she felt the pull of something ancient, a connection to the vampire world that seemed to course through her very veins. But with each passing day, the danger the Vampire King had warned her about became more real. It wasn't just the vampires who lived in the mansion. It was the whispers, the uneasy glances from the other servants, and the constant sense of being watched. Everyone seemed to know who she was, even if they didn't say it aloud. One afternoon, as Mia practiced signing in the privacy of her room, she was interrupted by a soft knock at the door. Her heart skipped a beat as she opened it, only to find the Vampire King's most trusted guard standing there. "The king requests your presence," he said, his expression impassive. Mia swallowed hard. The last time she had been summoned, it had been a conversation that left her feeling more uncertain than ever. She nodded and followed him through the mansion, her thoughts swirling. What did he want now? Was there more she needed to learn? Or was it something else entirely? They arrived at a large, ornate door, far deeper into the mansion than she had ever gone. The guard knocked softly, then opened the door without waiting for a response. The Vampire King stood by a massive fireplace, his dark silhouette framed by the flickering flames. He didn't turn to face her right away, his eyes fixed on the fire. "Close the door," he said softly, almost as if he were lost in thought. Mia obeyed, closing the door behind her. The room was dim, the air thick with a strange, almost magnetic energy. She couldn't shake the feeling that something significant was about to unfold. The Vampire King finally turned to face her, his amber eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. His expression was unreadable, but there was an intensity to his gaze that made Mia's heart race. "You've done well with the lessons," he said, his voice steady. "But now, we must move forward." Mia frowned. "Move forward? What do you mean?" "There is something I need to show you," he said, his voice laced with something serious. "It's time for you to fully understand the power you've awakened." A shiver ran down Mia's spine. She had been waiting for this moment, though she hadn't known what to expect. "What do you mean by the power I've awakened?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You have a connection to the silent tongue," he replied. "But it's more than just language. It's a part of you now, and it's time to see what it truly means." Mia's breath caught in her throat. "What do I have to do?" "Come with me," the Vampire King said, his voice commanding. He turned and walked toward the far side of the room, where an ancient-looking door stood. Mia hesitated for only a moment before following him. As she stepped into the room beyond the door, her eyes widened in awe. The room was massive, its walls lined with ancient books and strange artifacts that seemed to pulse with energy. At the center of the room stood an altar, and beneath it, a glowing stone, pulsing with an ethereal light. "This," the Vampire King said, his voice reverberating with power, "is the heart of the clan. It is the source of our power, of the vampire bloodlines, and of the silent tongue." Mia's eyes widened. "What does this have to do with me?" The Vampire King's gaze was intense as he looked at her. "The heart of the clan recognizes you, Mia. It's chosen you." She felt a sudden chill run through her. "Chosen? For what? I don't understand," she whispered. "I can't do this. You are more than just a waitress," the Vampire King interrupted, his voice firm. "You are part of something ancient, something powerful. The heart recognizes the bloodline that you carry, and it is ready to bond with you." Mia stepped back, her mind reeling. "No, this can't be real," she whispered. "I don't even know who I am." "That's the problem," the Vampire King said, his voice softening slightly. "You don't know who you are yet, but you will. And when you do, you'll understand why the heart has chosen you." Mia's heart raced. She couldn't comprehend it. She had thought that her life was simple, that she was just trying to get by, to survive. But now, everything had changed. The Vampire King approached the altar, his hand hovering above the glowing stone. "The heart will bind with you," he said. "But you must be willing to accept it. You must embrace the power that lies within you." Mia felt a pull, an invisible force tugging at her. Her heart beat faster as she stepped closer to the altar. She had no idea what she was about to do, but something in her soul knew that this was the moment everything would change. She closed her eyes and placed her hand over the stone, feeling a surge of energy rush through her. It was like nothing she had ever experienced, raw, ancient, and all-encompassing. The room seemed to pulse with life, and Mia's vision blurred as the power washed over her. For a moment, she thought she might faint, but then everything went still. The energy faded, and Mia opened her eyes, breathing heavily. The Vampire King was watching her closely, his eyes filled with an unreadable emotion. "You've done it," he said quietly. "You've bonded with the heart." Mia's mind was spinning. She didn't know what this meant, but she knew one thing. She was no longer just a waitress. She was part of something much larger, something that could never be undone. And the world she had stepped into? It was a world full of power, danger, and untold secrets. And there was no turning back. The days after the bonding were unlike anything Mia had ever experienced. The power that surged through her after touching the heart of the clan left her both exhilarated and terrified. She could feel it deep inside her, this ancient connection to something bigger than she had ever imagined. But it was also a weight, a constant reminder that her life had changed in ways she couldn't yet comprehend. The Vampire King had been watching her closely since that night, his eyes always searching for something in her, as if waiting for her to realize the full extent of the bond she had formed. He had told her that she was now part of a world that had been hidden from human eyes for centuries, but the true nature of that world was still a mystery to her. The mansion, once intimidating, now felt more like a prison than a sanctuary. Mia's days were filled with lessons, training her to harness the power that now coursed through her veins. The silent tongue was no longer just a language. It was a conduit for magic, for control, and for power that went far beyond words. The Vampire King taught her how to use it, how to manipulate the energy that flowed from her fingertips. But with each new lesson, the danger became clearer. There were others, vampires and humans alike, who would stop at nothing to control her, to use her for their own purposes. The Vampire King had warned her, but Mia didn't fully understand the stakes until she saw it for herself. One evening, as the mansion's servants prepared for another grand event, Mia was called to the Vampire King's private chambers. The air was heavy with tension as she walked down the long corridors, her footsteps echoing in the silence. She reached the door to his chambers and knocked softly. The Vampire King's voice came from within, smooth and commanding as always. "Come in." Mia entered, and for the first time, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip a beat: concern. It was fleeting, but it was there. "Sit," he said, motioning to the chair across from him. "We need to talk." Mia took a seat, her mind racing. What was this about? "There are others who seek you, Mia," the Vampire King began, his voice steady but tinged with something darker. "You are a key, and there are many who want to use you to unlock doors that should remain closed." "Who are they?" Mia asked, her voice trembling despite herself. The Vampire King's gaze hardened. "Enemies of the clan. They have been watching you since the moment you spoke the silent tongue. They know the power you now possess. They will come for you." Mia felt a chill run down her spine. She hadn't realized just how dangerous this was. She had thought she was simply learning a language, a gift that tied her to a world she didn't understand. But now, she was a target. "How do you know they'll come?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The Vampire King stood up, his movements fluid and deliberate. He paced for a moment, his hands clasped behind his back. "Because they always do," he replied, his tone dark. "When the heart of the clan recognizes someone, it sets off a chain of events. There are those who will stop at nothing to claim that power for themselves. They will use every means at their disposal." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. She had known there was danger, but she hadn't fully grasped the extent of it. "What do we do?" she asked, the fear creeping into her voice. The Vampire King stopped pacing and turned to face her. "You must prepare yourself, and I will protect you," he said, his voice firm. "But you must trust me. This power that flows through you, it's not just a gift. It's a weapon. And if we are to survive, we need to learn how to wield it." Mia nodded, her mind still reeling from everything she had just learned. She had always been just an ordinary girl, someone who had worked hard to make ends meet. Now, she was something more, and the weight of that truth was almost too much to bear. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. The Vampire King's eyes softened for a moment, and for the first time, Mia saw a flicker of something human in him. "First, we will continue your training. You must learn how to control the magic that now resides within you. We will teach you how to use it, how to defend yourself. And when the time comes, you will be ready." Mia didn't know if she was ready, but she knew she had no choice. This world she had stumbled into was far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And now, there was no turning back. She had made a choice, whether she had realized it or not. "I'm ready," she said, her voice strong despite the fear gnawing at her. The Vampire King gave a single nod, his expression unreadable. "Good," he said, "because what comes next will test everything you are." The words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. Mia didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. And whatever lay ahead, she would face it head on, with the strength she hadn't known she possessed. She was no longer just a waitress. She was part of something far greater, and the choices she made from here on out would shape the future of both the vampire and human worlds. As the Vampire King turned away from her, his figure blending into the shadows of the room, Mia steeled herself for the challenges ahead. She didn't know what would happen next, but she was ready to fight for her place in this new, dangerous world. The next few days passed in a haze for Mia. The weight of the Vampire King's words, that she was no longer just a waitress, that she was part of something far bigger, seemed to be pressing down on her at all times. She could feel the power growing within her, pulsing under her skin like a constant reminder that her life was no longer hers to control. The Vampire King's lessons continued, each one more intense than the last. He taught her not just the silent tongue, but also the ways of the vampire world, its politics, its rules, and its dangers. She learned quickly that she was not just a student in this world. She was a weapon, a tool in the ongoing battle between the vampire clans, a key to something that could tip the balance of power. It was a lot to take in, and Mia often found herself questioning her place in it all. One evening, after a particularly exhausting lesson, she stood by the window of her room, staring out at the darkened grounds of the mansion. The mansion itself felt like a fortress, a place of secrets and shadows. The wind howled outside, and the trees in the garden swayed as if trying to escape the weight of the world that hung over them. She didn't know how much longer she could stay here, but the thought of leaving was even more terrifying. There was nowhere else for her to go. She had been thrust into this world, and now she was a part of it whether she liked it or not. Hey! Knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. She turned to see the Vampire King's guard standing there, his face expressionless. "The king requests your presence," he said, his voice cold. Mia's stomach twisted. She had been summoned by the Vampire King before, but she never knew what to expect. She followed the guard through the winding halls of the mansion, the air thick with tension. The mansion, with its grand architecture and ancient stone walls, seemed to close in on her with each step she took. Finally, they reached the Vampire King's private chambers. The guard knocked on the door and stepped aside. Mia entered to find the Vampire King standing by the large fireplace, his back to her. The flames cast dancing shadows across his face, making his features appear even more intimidating. "You've been learning well," he said without turning around. His voice was low and steady, but there was something in it that made Mia's heart race. "But there's something more I need to teach you." Mia's mind raced. What could he possibly mean? She had been through so much already, and now there was more? "What is it?" she asked, her voice trembling despite her efforts to remain calm. The Vampire King turned to face her, his amber eyes glowing in the dim light. "It's time for you to understand the true nature of your power," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You have been bonded with the heart of the clan, and with that bond comes a responsibility. A responsibility to protect what we have built." Mia's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't realized how much was at stake until now. She had thought that learning the silent tongue and becoming a part of the vampire world was enough, but it seemed there was more to it than that. "What do I need to do?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Vampire King stepped closer to her, his presence overwhelming. "You must learn to control the power within you. You must learn to defend this world, our world. Because there are those who would destroy everything we have worked for. There are enemies among us, enemies who want to take what is ours." Mia's mind raced. Enemies? She hadn't even fully grasped the world she was in, and now she was supposed to defend it? "How do I fight them?" she asked, the question escaping her before she could stop it. The Vampire King's eyes darkened. "It's not just about fighting, Mia. It's about understanding the forces at play. There are those who seek to manipulate the magic you now carry. You must be prepared for anything." Mia felt a chill run through her. The weight of his words sank in, and she realized just how little she knew about the world she had been thrust into. But she couldn't back away now. She had come too far, and there was no turning back. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said, her voice steady despite the fear building inside her. The Vampire King nodded, his gaze never leaving her face. "Good," he said, "because the time to act is coming. And when it does, you'll need to be ready." With those words, he turned and walked toward the door. Mia's heart pounded in her chest. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing. The Vampire King was right. She had been chosen for something far greater than herself. And now, it was time for her to embrace it, to become the protector she had never known she was destined to be. As she walked back to her room, the weight of the Vampire King's words settled deep within her. She wasn't just a part of the vampire world. She was a part of its future. And the choices she made from here on out would determine the fate of both the vampire and human worlds. The following weeks passed in a whirlwind for Mia. Each day, she trained under the watchful eyes of the Vampire King, learning to harness the power that flowed through her. The silent tongue, once just a language, had become a tool, an extension of herself. The Vampire King pushed her harder with each lesson, and though Mia often felt overwhelmed, she couldn't deny the thrill of finally understanding the world she had been thrust into. But as the Vampire King had warned her, the danger was only beginning. One evening, as she walked through the grand halls of the mansion, her mind heavy with the weight of her training, a sudden sound broke her from her thoughts. It was a low, muffled noise, like a thump, followed by a voice, faint but clear. "Help." The word hung in the air, pulling at Mia's very soul. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned toward the sound. It was coming from the direction of the dungeon, a part of the mansion she had never ventured into. The dungeon was a place she had been warned about, a place where the clan's enemies were imprisoned and tortured. The Vampire King had told her never to go near it. But now, she could hear someone calling for help. Her instincts screamed at her to run, to leave it alone. But her heart told her something different. She couldn't ignore it. She had to find out what was going on. Without thinking, she turned and hurried down the hallway, her footsteps echoing in the silence of the mansion. The sound grew louder as she approached, and the closer she got, the more urgent the cries became. "Please, someone." The voice was weak, almost broken. Mia's pulse quickened. She reached the door to the dungeon, her hand trembling as she reached for the cold, iron handle. She hesitated for a moment, fear gnawing at her. But then, her hand gripped the handle, and she pushed the door open. The moment she stepped inside, the temperature seemed to drop. The dungeon was dimly lit, with shadows stretching long across the stone floor. The air was thick with the scent of dampness and something else, something darker. In the far corner of the room, a figure lay slumped against the wall, their hands bound by chains. Mia's breath caught in her throat when she saw who it was. It was a young girl, barely older than a child, with bruises covering her arms and face. Her eyes were wide with fear, and when she saw Mia, a flicker of hope crossed her face. "Please," the girl whispered, her voice weak. "They're going to kill me." Mia's heart ached at the sight. She had no idea who this girl was, but she couldn't leave her there, alone and trapped. She rushed to the girl's side, her hands shaking as she tried to free her from the chains. But before she could do anything, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. Mia froze. She recognized the footsteps. It was the Vampire King. He had been searching for her, and now, he was close. Panic surged in her chest. She couldn't let him find her here. She had no idea what the girl's fate would be if he saw her. Mia quickly looked around the dungeon, her mind racing. The shadows in the corner of the room seemed to offer a way out. She helped the girl to her feet, her hands steady despite the fear gripping her. "Come on, we have to go," Mia whispered urgently. The girl's eyes were wide with confusion, but she didn't argue. Together, they moved quickly, silently toward the shadows. Mia's heart pounded in her chest as they ducked behind a large stone pillar, just as the door to the dungeon swung open. The Vampire King entered, his amber eyes scanning the room. Mia held her breath, praying that he wouldn't notice them. She could feel his presence like a storm gathering in the air, his power radiating through the room. His gaze swept over the dungeon, pausing for a moment on the chains that had been left behind. He didn't see them. At least, not yet. The Vampire King took a few more steps into the room, his sharp eyes scanning every inch of the space. Mia's pulse raced, her hand on the girl's arm, holding her still. If they were caught now, Mia didn't want to think about what would happen. But then, just as quickly as he had entered, the Vampire King turned and walked back toward the door. "We have guests," he said, his voice cold and commanding. "Prepare them." Mia exhaled, her body going limp with relief. The door slammed shut behind him, and the dungeon was once again silent. Mia slowly let go of the breath she had been holding. She looked at the girl beside her, who was still trembling. "Are you okay?" Mia asked softly. The girl nodded, her wide eyes filled with fear. They were going to use me to lure him," she said in a barely audible voice. The Vampire King, Mia's eyes widened. "Why?" The girl swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "I don't know, but they said I was the only way to get to him, that I would be used to make him come." Mia frowned, trying to make sense of it. "Who would do this?" "The Inquisitors," the girl whispered, her voice barely a whisper. "They want to take him down. They want to kill all of you." Mia felt the blood drain from her face. The Inquisitors, the ones who had hunted the vampires for centuries. They were back, and they were targeting the Vampire King. She realized then that the danger wasn't just within the mansion, it was outside, too. The world was closing in on them, and Mia had just become a part of the battle. The girl's eyes met hers, and for the first time, Mia realized that her role in this world was more than just learning to control the silent tongue. She was now a part of a war that had been brewing for centuries. A war that would determine the fate of both the vampire and human worlds. The realization hit Mia like a wave crashing against the shore. The Inquisitors, their very name sent a chill down her spine. She had only heard whispers of them. Rumors passed between the vampires and the humans who still feared them. But now, the truth was undeniable. The war had come to their doorstep. The girl beside her, still trembling, had confirmed what Mia had dreaded. The Inquisitors were not just a myth, They were alive, and they were hunting the Vampire King. The danger was real, and Mia, whether she liked it or not, was now part of this battle. "We have to leave," Mia whispered urgently, her eyes scanning the dimly lit dungeon for a way out. "They'll come for us." The girl shook her head, her face pale with fear. "We can't. There's nowhere safe. They're everywhere." Mia felt her heart race. What could they possibly do against the Inquisitors? They were an ancient order, relentless in their pursuit of vampire blood, and they had been hunting them for centuries. The girl's voice trembled as she spoke again. "They've infiltrated the human world. They're already planning their attack. They'll use anyone, any weakness they can find." Mia's thoughts raced as she tried to make sense of it all. She had thought the world she had entered was dangerous enough with the vampire politics and the power she was learning to control, but now it seemed there was an even darker force at play. She had always known that power came with consequences, but she hadn't expected to find herself in the middle of an ancient war. Mia turned to the girl, her voice firm. "We have to warn the Vampire King." The girl shook her head again, more urgently this time. "It's too late for warnings. The Inquisitors will know everything. They have spies everywhere." Mia stood there, frozen, as the weight of her situation settled over her. The Vampire King had already warned her about the dangers that would come with her newfound power, but she hadn't fully understood what that meant until now. It wasn't just the vampires who would come after her. The Inquisitors were a force that could tear everything apart. "What are we supposed to do?" Mia asked, her voice barely a whisper. "How do we fight them?" The girl hesitated, her eyes flickering with something that almost resembled hope. "There is one thing you can do," she said quietly. "One way to stop them." Mia leaned in, eager for any answer, any way to fight back. "What is it?" The girl's gaze flickered nervously to the shadows, as if the walls themselves might be listening. "You must find the heart," she said. "The heart of the clan." Mia blinked. She had heard the Vampire King speak of the heart before, but she hadn't understood its significance. The heart of the clan? What is it? Where is it? The girl took a deep breath, steadying herself. "It's an ancient artifact. It holds the true power of the vampires, the power that binds them all. It's what keeps the vampire world in balance. If you can find it, you can use its power to stop the Inquisitors." Mia's heart pounded in her chest. The heart of the clan, the one thing that could turn the tide in this war. But where was it? How could she possibly find it? "How do I get to it?" Mia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The girl hesitated before answering, her voice trembling. "I don't know exactly. The heart is hidden, and only those who are truly worthy can access its power. But there is one place where you might be able to start searching." "Where?" Mia asked, her heart racing. "The Temple of the Ancients," the girl replied. "It's an old place, deep within the vampire territories. Only those who are connected to the heart can enter." Mia's mind raced as she processed the information. The Temple of the Ancients. It sounded like a legend, something out of a fairy tale, but the girl's words were filled with so much fear and urgency that Mia knew it had to be real. And if it was real, it was her only hope of stopping the Inquisitors and saving everything she had come to care about. "I'll go," Mia said, her voice steady. "I'll find the heart. I'll stop them." The girl's eyes widened. "You can't do this alone," she said, her voice filled with panic. "The heart is protected by ancient magic. It's not something you can just walk up to and take. You'll need help." Mia hesitated, her thoughts swirling. She knew she couldn't do this alone. But who could she trust in a world full of enemies and allies with hidden motives? She thought of the Vampire King, his power, his knowledge. But she also thought of his warnings, the way he had kept her at arm's length, always careful with his trust. Could she trust him now? Was he truly on her side, or was he just another player in this dangerous game? "I'll go to the Vampire King," Mia said finally, her voice firm. "He's the only one who can help me. I need him." The girl nodded, her face filled with a mixture of fear and relief. "Then hurry," she urged. "You don't have much time. The Inquisitors are already moving." Mia turned and ran, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of the world seemed to press down on her as she made her way through the mansion's long corridors. She was about to step into the unknown, to face the ancient forces that threatened everything. But this time, she wasn't going to run away. This time, she would fight. She had no choice. The war had already begun. The urgency in Mia's steps grew with every passing second. She could feel the weight of the Inquisitors' threat hanging over her like a dark cloud. As she raced through the long corridors of the mansion, her mind was focused on one thing: getting to the Vampire King. He was her only chance to survive this, to stop the looming storm that threatened everything she had come to care about. She had to act fast. The girl in the dungeon had told her everything she needed to know. The Inquisitors were closing in, and time was running out. Mia had no illusions about what the Temple of the Ancients meant. It was the only place that could hold the power to protect her, but it was a place few had ever returned from. Ancient magic, hidden dangers, and trials awaited those who sought the heart. But what choice did she have? As Mia turned the corner and approached the Vampire King's chambers, her thoughts swirled. She had already come so far. She had learned the silent tongue, connected with the heart of the clan, and now it felt like she was standing on the precipice of something monumental. It wasn't just about learning power anymore. It was about wielding it, understanding it, and using it to survive. Her knuckles rapped softly against the Vampire King's door. She could hear movement inside before the door slowly creaked open. The guard stood there, his usual stoic expression unchanged. "The king is waiting for you," he said, stepping aside. Mia's heart raced as she walked into the dimly lit room. The Vampire King was standing near the fireplace, his posture still, as commanding as ever. He turned to face her as she entered, his amber eyes locking onto hers. "You came," he said simply, his voice betraying nothing. Mia nodded, her breath shaky but her resolve strong. "I need your help," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "The Inquisitors, they're coming. They've been planning this for years. I have to find the heart of the clan before they do." The Vampire King's expression shifted for the briefest moment, his sharp eyes narrowing slightly as he took in her words. "And you think the heart will stop them?" he asked, his tone calm, but filled with something deeper. "It's the only chance we have," Mia said. "The Temple of the Ancients. The heart is there. I don't know how to find it, but it's our only hope." The Vampire King stood still for a moment, contemplating her words. Mia could feel the tension between them, the weight of everything hanging in the balance. "You're right," he finally said, his voice low but resolute. "The heart is powerful, but it's not something that can be easily claimed. It's protected by ancient magic, magic that can either empower you or destroy you. But if the Inquisitors are truly coming for you, then we have no choice." Mia's heart beat faster. "What do we need to do?" she asked. The Vampire King's eyes met hers, and for the first time, she saw something like a flicker of trust in them. "We will go together," he said, his voice firm. "You will need to be prepared for what lies ahead. The temple is not just a physical place. It's a test, one that will push you to your limits. But I will guide you. Together, we can find the heart." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She had never been so uncertain in her life, but the Vampire King's words made her believe that this was the only way forward. She had to trust him, despite everything she didn't know about him and this world she had entered. "Let's do it," she said, her voice stronger now. "I'm ready." The Vampire King gave her a slight nod. "Very well. We leave at dawn. Be prepared." With that, he turned away, and Mia felt the weight of what was about to happen settle on her shoulders. The next morning came quickly, and Mia found herself standing at the gates of the mansion, her heart pounding in her chest. The Vampire King stood beside her, his presence steady, unyielding. The guards had prepared the horses, and everything was set for their journey. Mia had no idea what to expect, but the determination in her gut was undeniable. The Inquisitors were out there, hunting for her, for the heart, and she wasn't about to let them win. They rode in silence, the only sound the rhythm of the horses' hooves on the cobbled road. The landscape around them was peaceful, the fields green and untouched, but Mia knew the calm wouldn't last. The deeper they went, the more she could feel the pull of the temple, the place that had been hidden for so long. As they drew closer to their destination, the air grew heavier, the tension thickening. It wasn't long before they reached the edge of a dense forest, its towering trees casting long shadows on the ground. "This is it," the Vampire King said, his voice low. "The temple lies beyond these woods. We'll need to be cautious from here on out." Mia nodded, her stomach tight with nerves. This was it, the place where everything would change. The Temple of the Ancients was within their reach, but she had no idea what lay ahead. With every step, the uncertainty grew. They had no map, No clear path, and no guarantees that they would survive whatever trials awaited them. But Mia had no choice. She had already come too far to turn back, and as she followed the Vampire King deeper into the woods, she knew that she would have to face whatever came next with everything she had. The heart of the clan awaited, and with it, the fate of the vampire world, and her own, hung in the balance. The forest grew darker as Mia and the Vampire King ventured deeper into its heart. The tall trees seemed to stretch endlessly above them, their branches thick and interwoven, blocking out the moonlight. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the sound of their horses' hooves was muffled by the soft, wet ground beneath them. The tension was palpable. Mia could feel the weight of the journey ahead pressing down on her. Every step they took felt like it brought them closer to something unknown, something that could either save them or destroy everything they had fought for. The Vampire King rode ahead, his figure a shadow in the darkness, his expression unreadable. Mia tried to steady her breath, focusing on the path ahead, but her thoughts kept returning to the heart of the clan, the ancient artifact that could change everything. They had to find it before the Inquisitors did. The further they rode, the more the forest seemed to come alive with an eerie energy. Mia could sense it, a strange pull in the air, as if the very woods were watching them, waiting for them to arrive. She could feel the magic stirring around them, ancient and powerful. "We're close." The Vampire King's voice broke the silence, startling Mia. She glanced up at him, her heart pounding. "How do you know?" she asked. "Because the magic here responds to us," he replied, his eyes scanning the path ahead. "The temple is hidden, but it's connected to the heart. It can feel our presence." Mia's breath caught in her throat. She hadn't realized that the temple, this place they were seeking, was alive in a way. It wasn't just a building, it was a living, breathing force. "What happens when we get there?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. The Vampire King's gaze darkened, his face hardening. "We'll face the trials. The temple doesn't let just anyone in. You'll have to prove yourself worthy." "Prove myself worthy?" Mia echoed, a knot forming in her stomach. "How?" "The trials are different for each person," he said, his voice low. "They will test your strength, your resolve, your ability to harness the power you've awakened. Only if you pass will the heart reveal itself." Mia's mind raced. The weight of his words settled over her like a thick fog. She had already faced so much, but this was different. The temple, the trials, the heart of the clan, they all held power beyond anything she had ever known. And if she failed, she didn't want to think about it. The Vampire King turned his horse, signaling for Mia to follow him as they veered off the main path. The trees grew denser, the air cooler, as if the very earth was pulling them toward the temple. Mia's heart beat in her chest like a drum. She had no idea what to expect. They came to a clearing, and in the center of it, half hidden by the thick vines and overgrown plants, stood a stone archway. It was ancient, covered in moss, but its edges were still sharp and clear. The archway seemed to pulse with a soft, otherworldly glow, and Mia could feel the energy radiating from it, vibrating through her very bones. "This is it," the Vampire King said, his voice low and reverent. The entrance to the temple. Mia stared at the archway, her mind spinning. It was beautiful, but there was something unsettling about it. The magic surrounding it was powerful, but it also felt dangerous. "How do we get in?" she asked. "We step through," the Vampire King replied, his voice steady. "But once we do, there is no turning back. Whatever happens inside, we must face it." Mia swallowed hard, her throat dry. There was no more room for doubt. She had come this far, and there was no turning back now. She had to do this, not just for herself, but for the world she was now a part of. "I'm ready," she said, her voice shaky but determined. The Vampire King nodded, then dismounted from his horse. Mia followed suit, her heart racing as she took her first steps toward the archway. As soon as she stepped beneath it, the air around them seemed to shift. The temperature dropped, the ground beneath them seemed to hum with energy, and the very trees seemed to lean in, as if watching them. Mia felt the magic grow stronger, wrapping around her. Like an invisible thread. She could feel the weight of the trials ahead, but she also felt the pull of the heart of the clan, calling to her, urging her to continue. They passed through the archway, and instantly, the world around them changed. The clearing they had been standing in was gone, replaced by an expansive, hollowed-out cavern. The walls were lined with intricate carvings, the stone surfaces glowing with an ethereal light. The air was thick with magic, ancient and powerful. In the center of the cavern, a massive pedestal stood, surrounded by symbols and runes Mia had never seen before. It was clear that this was the heart of the temple, the place where the trials would begin. "This is it," the Vampire King said, his voice echoing in the cavern. "The trials will begin now. Are you ready?" Mia nodded, though the uncertainty in her chest was impossible to ignore. She had no idea what to expect, but she knew one thing. There was no turning back now. The temple had accepted them, and the heart was waiting. What lay ahead would test her in ways she couldn't yet imagine, but she was ready to face it. She had to be. For herself, for the Vampire King, and for the world she was now a part of. The trials within the Temple of the Ancients were unlike anything Mia could have imagined. The moment they stepped inside, the world around them seemed to come alive. The stone walls hummed with ancient energy, and the air was thick with magic, making every breath feel heavy, charged. The Vampire King stood by her side, his presence like an anchor in the storm of uncertainty that raged within her. They had entered this sacred place together, but the challenges ahead would test them both in ways they hadn't anticipated. The massive pedestal at the center of the cavern, adorned with glowing symbols and intricate carvings, was now the focal point of their attention. The energy in the room pulsed with a strange rhythm, and Mia could feel it drawing her in, beckoning her to approach. As she stepped forward, a deep, rumbling voice echoed through the cavern. It wasn't a voice she could hear with her ears, but one that seemed to resonate within her very soul. "The first trial begins," the voice intoned. The ground beneath Mia's feet trembled slightly, as a dark, swirling mist began to rise from the floor, coiling around her like a living thing. "To prove your worth, you must face your deepest fear. Only when you have conquered it will the path to the heart be revealed." Mia's heart raced, her hands trembling as the mist swirled around her, thick and suffocating. The Vampire King stood a few steps behind her, watching with an unreadable expression. Mia's mind flashed with images, memories of her old life, of the poverty and struggle she had endured, of the moments when she felt helpless, alone, and afraid. But there was something more. There was something deeper, something she had buried in her heart. She could feel it, the presence of a fear far older than anything she had ever experienced. The mist thickened, pressing against her chest, and Mia could feel the weight of it crushing her. Her breath caught in her throat as the fear began to take shape, coalescing into a figure from her past. The image of her mother, pale and sickly, lying in a hospital bed, flashed before her eyes. She could hear the soft beeping of the machines, the sterile smell of the hospital, the hopelessness that had clung to her every day. "You couldn't save her," the figure whispered, its voice cold and haunting. "You failed her." Mia recoiled, her heart aching with the weight of the guilt and grief that had been buried deep within her. She had always blamed herself for her mother's death. She had been unable to do anything to save her. The guilt had festered, a wound that never healed. "No," Mia whispered, shaking her head. "It's not my fault. I did everything I could." But the figure laughed, a hollow, mocking sound that echoed through the cavern. "You think you're strong enough now?" it taunted. "What are you going to do? You can't even save yourself." The fear gripped her tighter, tightening like a vice around her chest. Mia felt the tears prick her eyes, the weight of the past crashing down on her. She had never faced this fear, never confronted the truth that had haunted her for so long. But now, in this place, with the power of the silent tongue running through her veins, she realized something. She wasn't the same person she had been before. She had changed. She had the power to confront this fear, to overcome it. Mia closed her eyes, taking a deep breath, and with all the strength she could muster, she stepped forward. "I am not weak," she said, her voice firm. "I am not the girl who couldn't save her mother. I am stronger than that." The mist writhed around her, but Mia stood tall, her heart pounding in her chest. She reached out with the magic inside her, calling upon the power of the silent tongue. The words came to her without thinking, flowing from her lips like a song. "I am not afraid. I will not be controlled by fear." As she spoke the words, the mist began to dissipate, swirling away like smoke in the wind. The figure of her mother began to fade, the haunting voice silenced. The air grew still, and the weight that had pressed on Mia's chest lifted. She stood there, breathing heavily, her body trembling with the release of the fear that had bound her for so long. The cavern around her was silent, and Mia realized that she had passed the first trial. She had faced her deepest fear and overcome it. The Vampire King stepped forward, his amber eyes watching her closely. "You've done it," he said, his voice filled with approval. "The first trial is complete, but the path ahead is still uncertain. There are more trials to come, each one harder than the last. You will need to draw on every ounce of strength you have." Mia nodded, her heart still racing, but a sense of determination settled in her chest. She had faced her fear and survived. She wasn't just a part of this world anymore. She was becoming a force to be reckoned with. The second trial awaited, and Mia was ready. Whatever it took, she would see it through. She had no choice. She was bound to this world now, and she would fight for her place in it, no matter what it cost her. As she stood in the cavern, the Vampire King at her side, Mia felt a surge of confidence and resolve. The path ahead was dark and uncertain, but for the first time since entering this world, she felt ready to face whatever came next. In this captivating tale, Mia finds herself thrust into a world filled with ancient powers, secretive vampire clans, and unimaginable dangers. As she navigates through the trials set before her, she uncovers dark secrets and confronts fears that have haunted her for years. Her journey intertwines with the fates of powerful beings, and through it all, she must learn to harness the power that flows through her veins. As the trials become increasingly difficult, Mia's strength and resolve are tested. With the Vampire King guiding her, she learns what it means to wield such incredible power and how to protect herself from the enemies that lurk in the shadows. This vampire story delves into the heart of vampire culture, magic, and the battles that define the fate of both the human and vampire worlds. The stakes grow higher as Mia discovers the true nature of the heart of the clan, a mystical object with the potential to change everything. But the path is fraught with challenges, and Mia must decide if she is ready to fully embrace her role in this dangerous new world. With enemies closing in, Mia must confront her deepest fears and prove herself worthy of the ancient power that now calls to her. As she ventures deeper into the Temple of the Ancients, she uncovers not only the truth about the heart, but also the dark forces that threaten to destroy everything. This story is filled with intrigue, action, and unexpected twists, making it one of the most thrilling vampire stories you'll read. As Mia battles her inner demons and faces the Inquisitors, she becomes a key figure in a war that will determine the fate of both the vampire and human worlds. With suspense building at every turn, this vampire story will keep you hooked from beginning to end, drawing you into a world of dark magic, powerful vampire clans, and a young woman who must embrace her destiny, no matter the cost.